Vishnurva Tripurantako Bhavatu Va Brahma Surendrotava Bhanurva Shashalakshanota Bhagavan Buddhota Siddhotava Ragadvesha Visharti Mohrahita Sattvanu Kampodhyato Yas sarvai saha samskrito gunaganais tasmai namah sarvada. The Supreme Reality and its messengers are known by various names in various traditions. But as for me, I offer my worship always to the one going by any name and belonging to any tradition, who is free from attachment and hatred, free from worldliness and delusion, who is filled with compassion towards all living beings, and who is possessed of all noble virtues. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us all. Good morning, everyone. This morning the topic is, why don't we see the truth? Why don't we see the truth? That is the ultimate truth, spiritual truth. And the question arises because truth should be obvious. The truth is that which is. The truth is that which is real. The truth is that which can never be denied. The truth is that which is self-luminous by nature. The truth is that which is the only obvious thing that is. Untruth is that which is not. Untruth is that which is unreal. Untruth is that which is just an imagination, a hallucination, a delusion. So how is it that the ultimate truth, the truth which is reality itself, the truth which is eternal, the truth which is self-luminous, the truth which is existing in its own glory, the truth which is beyond all darkness, that we don't see it? Why is it that we are caught in this situation where we have to pray, Asato Ma Sadgamaya, lead us from the unreal to the real? So Ma Sadgamaya also means lead us from the untrue, that which is not Asat, that which doesn't exist, to Sat, that which does exist. Why should we have to pray, exist to that which does exist? If that exists, then it should be obvious. That which doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. So why should we have to pray to go beyond it? So this is the strange situation that we find ourselves in. This situation where the reality is that which we don't see. The unreality, the non-existent, the delusion is that which we see. And so it's a great mystery of existence. Those who have realized the highest truth, those great souls, and there's some in the world at all times. It's said, even in Jewish tradition, they have the idea that they are always, in the Jewish tradition, they say that there are always, at all times in the world, some great sages who know the truth. And in the Hindu tradition, there's the same. And I haven't seen it stated in the Christian tradition, except in the words of a modern Christian monk named Thomas Burton, who died in 1968, I believe. 68 or 69, I forget which. He said that there must always be some people in the world who know God, that is, who know the truth. And the idea behind that, whether it's the Hindu idea, the Jewish idea, or the Christian idea, and it's there in the Islamic tradition as well, in the Sufi tradition, the idea is that if there were not those who know the highest truth, then the world itself would become chaos rather than a cosmos. And so there are always some in the world who know the highest truth. But those who have realized the highest truth, they say that when one realizes the highest truth, then one sees that which always was. One has the experience that's beyond words, but one has the experience, so this was the truth all along. This was always the truth. And I always knew it, but somehow I didn't know that I knew it. This is the obvious truth. This was never absent from my experience, but somehow I didn't see it. Somehow I didn't realize it. And so when we attain to the highest truth, when we attain to realization, when we attain to enlightenment, we attain to that which we've always known, which we can't forget because it's reality itself. We can't forget because that's who we are. We can't forget because it's the only truth. And yet we seem to have forgotten it. Somehow we seem to be in this condition where we don't know the truth. We don't know reality. We've forgotten who we are. We've forgotten what the world is. We've forgotten what truth is. Sri Krishna says in the second chapter of the Gita, he says such things as nasato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sataha. Nasato vidyate bhavo. The unreal has no existence. Na bhavo vidyate sataha. And there's no non-existence for that which is real. So the unreal has no existence, and that which is real has no non-existence. And yet we see the unreal and don't see the real. That which is unreal seems to have existence for us, and the real seems to be far away. And so we have the idea that we must go through many, many lifetimes of practice before we can come back to a state of enlightenment. So it'll take many lifetimes to come to that. Why should that be, when this is the truth right here? And so again, those who have experienced the truth, for them, sometimes you can see in their words and their teachings a sense of not frustration, because they're beyond ordinary frustration, but sort of a divine frustration that we can't see the truth, which is so obvious to them. And so you see at Beggars once, Swami Vivekananda, after he had returned from his second visit to the West, I believe it was, he was sitting out on the grounds under a tree with some of his disciples. I don't know if any of his brother disciples were there, but probably, and then his own disciples. In those days, Beggars was very small. There were just a few people living there, but they were gathered around the Swami, and he was teaching. And he said, "Here is the visible Brahman, here, right in front of you. Don't you see it? Don't you see it? Here." And so for Swamiji it was obvious. And those who were present, because of Swamiji's great power, they said that all their minds were lifted to a very high state by the power of Swamiji. Because Swamiji was one to whom this was obvious. And when he says, "Don't you see it here," he didn't mean out here. He meant that right here, right where you are, instead of all of this that we see, including this, don't you see Brahman? And yet that's the condition that we find ourselves in. We find ourselves in a state where we see asat, not sat. So we see abhava, not bhava. So why is that our condition? Why do we see the untrue when the true should be the most obvious thing? So the various answers given in different religions. This is the great mystery for all religions. In the religions which which is most religions, which speak from the standpoint of the creation of God, that God has created the world, God has created us, God has created living beings, and so forth. Then the question sometimes assumes the form of, if God is perfect, how did he make a world which is so imperfect? If God is perfect, how did this world come to be where we find imperfection everywhere? So God being the perfect potter, he shouldn't be making faulty pots that have holes in them and that don't hold any water, but that's the nature of this world. It's like a pot that doesn't hold water. So how could God do this? And so again, there are various answers. One, of course, is that it's because of sin, because sin entered into the world, that God made the world perfect. The story in Genesis, in the texts of the Abrahamic traditions, the Bible, the Torah, etc., the Quran, then God made the world perfect, because God is perfect. And so God couldn't make an imperfect creation. God made the world perfect, but then human beings disobeyed God. And they, because of their disobedience, sin entered into the world. This is specifically the Christian answer. This is neither the Muslim nor the Jewish answer, but the Christian interpretation of things. The others take a somewhat different view, but we can't examine all of them. So the Christian view is that then sin entered into the world, and therefore we find the world imperfect. Had it not been for sin, then we would all live like Adam and Eve, live in a state of perfection. So that answer is ultimately not satisfying. And as I'll show, it's not the fault of Christianity itself. The same can be said of all of the dualistic answers in Hinduism as well. None of them are satisfying, and I'll go over those briefly as well. But say you accept that, okay, God is perfect and God made a perfect creation, and Adam and Eve were perfect. They knew the perfection and enjoyed perfect happiness and satisfaction. Why did God allow sin to enter into the creation? And so then there are various answers given to that. Once you accept this idea that God has created everything, God is perfect, and God should have made a perfect world, then you have all sorts of other complications. So if you say that sin created all of the problems, human beings disobeyed God, and therefore sin has spread in the world, then you have the problem of, well, why did God make the world where there was a possibility of sin? If everything was perfect, how did the possibility of sin come in? And so then the answer comes. Some have given the answer, theologically stated. I'll state it in just a simple form. And that is that God wanted to create human beings so that we could created us in God's image, which is the image of perfection. But he wanted us to have the possibility of loving God, because God wanted to experience the play of love between himself and his creation. And so he created human beings as the highest of his creation, beyond even the angels, and gave them free will. So because the love of a slave is no love at all. A slave might say, oh, master, I love you, but it's partly out of fear, because he knows that the master controls my life. The slave has no real love. The slave can't love. It's not the slave's fault. It's the part of his condition as a slave. And so God wanted people to freely be able to love, because it's only love freely given which is actual love. The love of a slave is not love. And so God gave us free will, which meant giving us the freedom to choose between good and evil. And so Adam and Eve chose evil, and therefore sin entered into the world. Well, still the question comes, if God dwelt in a state of perfection, if God is reality and perfect, then why did he need to why did he need to create people and have their love? It means that God was lacking something. God needed to have somebody else's love. His own existence wasn't enough. He needed to create people and have them love him, and then he could be happy. Now people love me, now I'm happy. Well, that's not much of a God. That's not a sign of perfection. So you see, once you accept this idea that God has created the world, and yet the world is imperfect, then you have problems. And an answer that's given sometimes in the Hindu tradition is that God is playing hide and seek. The God is within everything, within yourself, within everything, and God is playing hide and seek. Well, that's okay for those saints who realize that and then go on to realize God, but why do billions of people have to live in suffering so that God can have fun playing hide and seek? Again, it's good as poetry. It's good as poetry, but if you actually take that as a real, substantial, philosophical answer, that God created the world because he wanted to play hide and seek, and you have all of these billions and trillions of creatures, not just human beings, but all of these animals, everybody feeding on everybody else, everybody creating misery for everybody else, billions of people living through lifetimes of suffering and so forth, also God can play hide and seek. Well, that's a nice poetic answer. When you are a religious aspirant and you're seeking God, yes, that's an answer that satisfies the heart for the time being. But it's not a real answer. It's not a real answer. Why should God have fun playing hide and seek and make billions of people suffer? Endless misery, endless misery. I just mentioned before, to some of you at least, that there are some poor people, beggars, that I used to help outside of Belarus. And so I still keep in contact with them. I call them, I gave them cell phones so that I could call them. I call them and talk to them, see how things are going, and no end of the misery. And this is replicated to millions of people. I talked to this one girl who's about 21 years old. She doesn't know reading and writing. They were too poor. She couldn't go to school. They had to sit out on the sidewalk and beg just in order to have something to eat. This idea that many have in India, that the beggars are all rich. No. There are some beggars who do have plenty, but there are lots of beggars who have nothing, because I know them. I work with them. I've gone to their villages. I know them personally. Many of them don't have anything. And so these people didn't have anything. So this woman, her parents wanted her to get married. She doesn't know reading and writing. They don't have any money for dowry or anything. And so who are they going to get? They're not going to get an engineer or a nuclear physicist or a rocket scientist or somebody like that. They get somebody who's willing to marry a poor girl who has no money. And so she told me yesterday on the phone that she had to leave. She has a new baby, maybe about 8 months old. I saw it before I came several times, came here from India. New baby, and her husband was beating her, and the husband had no job, had no money. They didn't have a door on the house. The rain would blow into the house. The baby was sick all of the time. So she had to come back to her parents' house, and the parents have no money. And the parents only have one small little room where they live. So am I going to tell her, well, God is just playing hide and seek with you. God is just playing hide and seek with you. No, that has no meaning. Again, as good as poetry, the Swami Swarupanandaji, the great disciple of Swami Vivekananda, he was by nature a religious young man. He came to Swamiji when he was, I forget, he was in his 20s somewhere, I believe. And Swamiji said the day he came, he told Sister Nivedita, today we have made an acquisition. Because Swami Swarupananda came to him to ask to be his disciple and to join the order. So Swarupananda was a great soul. He died very young also. He only lived a few years. Was the first head of the Advaitashrama Mayavati and the editor of the Prabuddha Bharata. A great Swami. Unfortunately, just lived a few years. But when he was a young man, and was a believer in God and wanted to realize God. He was a sincere aspirant from his youth. But one day he saw a woman who had been begging all day and collected in a little earthen pot enough rice to fill the pot. It was enough for maybe one day's food for her and her children. So the whole day she'd been begging and she'd gotten just this much rice. That's all that she had to show for the day's work. And so suddenly somebody jostled her on the path and the pot fell and broke, the clay pot, and the rice was scattered in all of the filth of the street. And so the woman was weeping. And so Swami Swarupananda, this was before he became a Swami, he saw that. And he said, I can't believe in a God who would allow this in his creation. I can't accept a God who would allow this in his creation. And so he had been very devout before that, and he knew that he still kept his spiritual values, but he said, I can't believe in such a God who would allow such a thing. So he became a non-dualist, and that was why Swami Vivekananda entrusted him with the Advaitashrama. So again, the idea of a God who created the world, made everything perfect, but somehow the fault is ours. We're born into the world. What do we know? What do we know? We're born into the world. We find ourselves here. Well, of course, there's the idea of reincarnation, which I accept. I believe firmly in that. I have no doubt about the reality of reincarnation or the truth of reincarnation. But no matter how far you go back, you find it's the same thing. We're born into this situation that we don't know what we're doing. So So why was this product made without a user's manual? Why was this product made that was defective? Why isn't there a place where we can return it to the maker and say, you've made a defective world, please give us a good one? Swami Vivekananda himself said that God has made a mess of the world. I'm here to straighten it out. Now you may say that that's very egotistical. Swamiji also said that if God is the creator of the world, I could have done a much better job. Again, because he wasn't saying it from the standpoint of ego, that he could have actually made plants and animals and evolution and all of these, and the laws of physics and all of that. But he meant that the design of the universe itself is flawed. It's flawed, deeply flawed. And so this answer that God is playing hide and seek, or the other answer that in the Vedas it says that Prajapati said to himself, he was alone in all his glory, and he said, Ekoham bahusyam prajayeya. I am one. I want to become many. And so I multiply myself forth. And so the one enters into multiplicity. So again, why? If God is perfection, why does God need to enter into multiplicity? The answers that are given, the religious answers, philosophical answers that are given on that level, they don't work. They don't work. I'm sorry to say it, but they don't work. It's a real problem, and that's why many people today have lost faith in God, lost faith in spirituality, because these answers don't work. All of these answers, first of all, assume some purpose, that God had some purpose in creating the universe. And if God had a purpose, it means that God had a need. I have a purpose when I want to accomplish something. That's what a purpose means. I have a goal. I have a purpose that I want to accomplish. So if God had a purpose in creating the world, then God isn't God. Not much of a God anyway. He's a second-rate figure who made a faulty universe because he needed something. And so that's not God. If God is God, God is perfection itself. Perfection doesn't need anything. Perfection doesn't need a world. Perfection doesn't need to play hide and seek. Perfection doesn't need to make people so that they can love him. Because without people loving me, somehow I feel unfulfilled. So that's all such answers which assume some purpose are faulty. So then we have the idea also, the idea of play, a beautiful idea, that the universe is the play of God, that this is all just the play of the Divine Mother. The idea of play means that there's no purpose to it. When I was a kid, my grandmother would go every Sunday to my grandmother's house. We lived next door to one grandmother, and on Sunday we'd go to my maternal grandmother's house, who lived on the other side of town. And so she kept, for me and my siblings, Playstore. She had little play cans of food that had a label with peas and corn. They weren't actual food that had been emptied, but they were made for play. So just little tin cans with labels on them. And this was in the days before any computerization or miniaturization. And so she had a cash register which was just made out of cardboard. It didn't do anything, but you played like you were hitting the keys and things, and it didn't make any sound. It didn't have things. By that time, such things were available, but my grandmother was old school, and these were things that she had probably for my mother when my mother was a little girl in the 1920s. And so she had that, and the play canned goods and play boxes of things. And so I used to enjoy playing store. And I'd set up the store, and I'd play on the cash register, and I'd sell things to my little brothers and sister, and so forth. And it was a lot of fun. When I became 16, a friend of mine in school said, I'm working at a store here in town. I make good pocket money that way. And I thought, well, from my parents I get a little bit of allowance, but it's very little. It's not enough to do much with, because my parents were very modest means. And so I thought, well, that would be good. Let me get a job there. So he got me hired for one day, and I hated it, every minute of it. When I played store, it was fun. Now I'm actually helping in a store, and it was miserable. Why? Because there I had to do what I was doing. In play, I could do it as I wanted, and I could make things up, and I could, nobody cared what happened, and I couldn't get in trouble, and I could stop when I wanted to and go play something else. But suddenly, no, you got to be here from 9 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. You got to do this, you got to do that. There was no stopping. You had to do it. And so I went one day, worked one day, and then gave it up. That was enough. And so the idea of play is that there's no reason, there's no motive. It's just for play, just for play. And that's a much better answer. Even that, however, is not fully satisfying. It's not fully satisfying. It's a better answer, but it's not fully satisfying. Sri Ramakrishna once was talking, and I've quoted this before here in Houston and from this platform, and I'll mention it other times also because it's such a telling incident. Sri Ramakrishna one day was sitting in Dakshineshwar. It's recorded in the Kotamrita. And he said that all of this is Mother's play. It's all the Divine Mother's play, Ma Kali's play, Mother Kali's play. And so one of the devotees said, well, sir, this may be the play of the Divine Mother, but it's our misery. And then Sri Ramakrishna said, yes, but who are you? Who are you? Meaning you are the Divine Mother Kali. Not that Kali is out there, but playing with the little dolls and making some of us laugh and some of us cry, and she's having a great time. If that's the case, then that's a horrible idea of God. That's a horrible idea. It's no better than any of the other ideas of God. So Sri Ramakrishna said, but who are you? Meaning that your experience is the experience of the Divine Mother. That the Divine Mother is doing it from inside. That the whole universe is manifesting as the play of the Divine Mother, as a flower blossoms. Without purpose, without rhyme or reason, just as divine play. So that's a better answer. That's a better answer. There's no purpose involved. The mother's not trying to accomplish something. She's not even trying to accomplish, well, I want to have fun, so I'm going to make some people happy and some people miserable. No, that's a terrible idea. But we are the Divine Mother. Our experience is the play of the Divine Mother. The problem is that we've forgotten that it's play and we take it seriously. But in that answer of Sri Ramakrishna, there's not a difference between us and the Divine Mother, where Mother is playing with us, she's having a good time, and we're all miserable. No, our experience is the direct experience of the Divine Mother. There's no separation there. So all of these different ideas, all of these different answers of why this world, why don't we see the reality? Why is the reality kept from us? I've heard people say, I've even heard a Swami say once, that, well, God could give us all knowledge if he wanted to, but he doesn't want to. He wants to keep it for himself. And for him, that was a satisfying answer. For me, that's a completely unsatisfying answer. Then what kind of God is that? God could give us all divine knowledge. We could all be immersed in infinite, eternal bliss, infinite perfection. And yet he wants to keep it for himself. Well, that's not much of a God. I can't accept such a God. I can't accept any such idea of God. Because when you have the idea of God's agency, that God has created the universe, God has made everything, and God has put us where we are, then the question is always going to eventually come, why me? Why me? Many other people seem to be happy, but I'm suffering. This woman, a young woman I mentioned, who has a young child, has no money to take care of the child, and nothing to buy medicine with, and now her parents are complaining that, oh, you've come home, we have no money, what are we going to do with you? There's no room. She can't go to her husband because he's beating her, and there's no place to stay there, there's no money, nothing to take care of the child there, not even protection for the weather. Then why me? Why me? Why her? Why is she suffering like that? Well, of course, again, there's the answer of karma. And I believe in karma. I accept karma. I accept that karma, in our present state of experience, karma is a reality. Karma is inescapable. Karma we have to accept. But why karma? If God created everything, he created the circumstances where karma also come to be. Why did God create diabolical karma, where we have to suffer so much, where we have to learn through suffering? Again, when you give God agency, and God did all of this, then there's not a satisfying answer. I'm sorry, but there's no satisfying answer. From that standpoint of God being the agent of creation and God creating all of this, eventually you come to the question, why me? Other people are happy, why am I not happy? Other people have money, why don't I have any money? Somebody else got the job I wanted, why didn't I get the job? Why me? And so yes, you can accept it provisionally on the basis of karma, but then the question again comes, why karma? Why karma? Why do we have to go through this diabolical process? This diabolical process where everything is competition, everybody fighting to get air, people fighting over water, fighting over food, fighting over space. Why? Why? There's no answer from the standpoint of God. No answer. That's just the plain, bold truth, and one that Swami Vivekananda never shied away from. So getting towards a real answer, again, the idea of play is moving towards a real answer. It's not yet there, but it's moving towards a real answer. Even Holy Mother and Sri Ramakrishna would give provisional answers. Many of their answers were provisional. Why? Because that's what we want. That's the type of answer we want, the type of answer we can understand. I can understand when I see this building, that somebody had to build it. There had to be a maker of this building. I can see the intentionality in it. This didn't come by nature. It wasn't just random processes of nature suddenly threw this building up with 2x4s and plaster and glass windows and so many things, heating and air conditioning. This wasn't a random process of nature. Somebody had to build it. And so I can see that this building is not just a random process of nature. And so when I look at the universe, I can see that the universe must have had a builder. The infinite intricacy of the universe. It's one of the problems of modern science, which doesn't accept the idea of an agency of a creator God who made the universe. And they don't accept that for good reasons. I won't go into that, but there are good reasons why science doesn't accept that. But science tries to explain things in terms of itself. It tries to explain the universe in terms of its own principles, not thinking of who's outside of the universe who made the universe. No, the scientific approach is, what are the principles on which this universe functions? And one of the problems of science is the infinite intricacy of life on this planet, where if one thing were different, if one thing were a little different, life wouldn't be here. If the earth were a little closer to the sun or a little further from the sun, if the earth were bigger in size, there's so many different things. If the temperature were not moderated, if there were not an atmosphere. You see, a planet like Mars is not as big as the Earth, but it's a fairly big planet. But now there's very little atmosphere on Mars, but the Earth has an atmosphere. There's so many intricate things, infinitely intricate, they go together to make life possible. So there must have been someone who created it. That's a common sense viewpoint. And so just as a person coming to this building doesn't think, oh gee, look what I found out in the middle of nature. Nature just threw up this building. No, you know that somebody built it. So naturally, thinking in human terms, we think in terms of, well, somebody must have made this universe. We're used to human agency, and so we think in terms of divine agency. And so Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother also, like other great spiritual teachers, often spoke in terms of human agency about God. And so you hear, well, why doesn't God liberate everyone? And so Sri Ramakrishna says, well, because God doesn't want the play to end. Within a restricted context, within a context where you understand that the Divine Mother and the universe is the Divine Mother's play and everything, then that's a good answer. And Sri Ramakrishna himself gave it, that God doesn't want his play to end. But if you look outside of that restricted context, you find that the answer doesn't hold much. Well, God doesn't want his play to end, so we have to suffer. God doesn't want his play to end, so we have to suffer. Is that the situation? So, Holy Mother once said that about why everyone isn't equal, why everyone isn't equally positioned in life. And she said, gave the example of Ayodhya. where Sita came to Rama and said that, well, why don't you uplift everybody and make everybody the same? And so Rama explained to her that if everybody were the same, then how would Ayodhya function? How we have to have variety in order for the world to function. So that also is an answer given within a context of understanding, where people have the idea of God being an agent who creates the world, and God has to have diversity in order for the world to function. Well, again, within that context, and that was the context in which Holy Mother was speaking, in which Sri Ramakrishna was speaking, those answers are fine. And they, of course, knew the larger truth. And the larger truth is that eventually those answers are not fine. Those answers eventually don't hold up. And that's an uncomfortable truth, but it's a truth that eventually has to be faced. Why? Because eventually we come to such questions. If we're questioning, if we're thoughtful, we come to questions, why? Why all of this difficulty in going back to God? Why all of this difficulty of karma? Why all of this difficulty of so much suffering in the world? That Mother gives more power to some than to others, as Sri Ramakrishna said. Yes, again, within a circumscribed world of thought, that answer works. That answer works. But if we go outside of that circumscribed sphere of thought, it doesn't work. These answers all have a truth to them. They all have truth to them, where Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, illumined souls who came for the welfare of the world, they wouldn't have said them. There's nothing in the Kotamrita, there's nothing in Sri Ramakrishna's words or life, nothing in Holy Mother's teachings that was untrue, nothing that was not meant for the welfare of others. But there are smaller truths and there are bigger truths. As Swami Vivekananda said, that humanity doesn't move from untruth to truth, but from lower truth to higher truth. And so we have to realize eventually that there are limited truths that work within a certain limited sphere, but outside of that, they fall apart. They fall apart. And so I would say, in tune with Swami Vivekananda, I wouldn't say on my authority, because my authority doesn't hold much water, but on the authority of Swamiji and on the authority of the Vedanta tradition, that the only satisfactory answer lies in Advaita, in non-dualism. From any other standpoint, the answer falls apart. You still come to why. Why does God do this? If God is perfect, there was no need to make all of this imperfection. There's no other explanation but Advaita. And what does Advaita, what does non-dualism, non-dualistic Vedanta say? And it says that the whole problem is one of ignorance, avidya. The whole problem is one of ignorance. Now again, if you say, well, does that mean God has made us ignorant? No, no. Again, you come to the same problem, that why did God make us ignorant? God put us into ignorance. Well, God's having a good time, and I have to suffer. Why? Good for God, bad for me. So that's just my problem. I have to deal with it. God made me ignorant, and so I have to suffer. No, that's not the answer of Advaita. The answer is not that God made you ignorant. God wants you to be ignorant. God is creating people to be ignorant because it's God's divine will and God's divine play, and it's all a mystery. We can't understand these things because it's beyond understanding. Who can understand the mysterious ways of God? So we just have to accept it. God doesn't want us to know some things. God doesn't want us to be able to do some things. God wants us to wander through endless births of suffering. No. The problem is, the only reasonable answer is one of ignorance, that we don't know the truth. We don't know the truth. Why don't we know the truth? If I am one with the truth, if my true nature is the truth itself, why don't I know the truth? Is God keeping me from the truth? Then he's not much of a God. Or she is not much of a God. If she is keeping me in avidya, that's not much of a God. If God is keeping me from the truth. No, the problem is my own experience. I am ignorant. I have forgotten who I am. I have forgotten the truth. The responsibility is mine. If the responsibility is God's, then I have no hope. The only hope I have is for God to remove the ignorance. But if God can remove the ignorance, then God can put me back in ignorance. So that's no answer either, eventually. Now I'll come back to the devotional standpoint because that has truth and that's where most people can operate. But first, it's necessary to understand this, that short of ignorance, there's no answer for why the universe is here. Why don't I see God everywhere? Why don't I see God? If my mind were perfectly clear, if my mind were perfectly pure and illumined, I would see nothing but God. See nothing but God. Like Sri Ramakrishna, even if I saw forms of people and houses and other things, I would see it all as forms of the divine. I would see all of this as forms of the divine, floating in the ocean of divinity like waves in the ocean of divinity, all made of water, nothing but water. I would see that. Why don't I see that? Why don't I see God? Because I'm ignorant. Why am I ignorant? I don't know. That's part of my ignorance. I don't know. There's no answer to why am I ignorant. Why am I ignorant is one of the questions that Advaita Vedanta says can never be answered. Because you're asking reason about that which is outside of reason. The truth is outside of reason. My true nature as Brahman, as the Atman, as the Paramatman, as the Supreme Truth is beyond causation. And I'm asking, why did I forget? But there's no why there. There's no why there. What I find is a fact of having forgotten. I find the fact that I have forgotten my true nature. Or in devotional terms, I've forgotten God. I've forgotten who I am. I've forgotten the nature of God, who is my own inner nature. I've forgotten, and I don't know why. Many of the answers in the scriptures are given from the standpoint of ignorance, because we are ignorant. And so we want answers. And the answer that I'm giving you today is not satisfying to most people, probably not to most of you. It's not satisfying. But eventually we have to come to this, because otherwise we can't understand why we're in the situation we're in. Some of you have heard of Franz Kafka, the great novelist of the 20th century or early 20th century. He had a very famous short novella called Metamorphosis. It's a great novel. It's one of the classics of the 20th century literature. So in that, Kafka says that one day the man who's the protagonist of the novella, he's an office worker, and one day he wakes up and he finds that he's late for work, and he doesn't feel like going to work because his work is all a frustration. And then his parents come to call him that he must get up, and his boss comes, or somebody from the office comes and says, where are you? You're late. You must come to work. But he finds that he's an insect. In some translations of the story, he's a caterpillar. In the actual original, it says some type of vermin, meaning some sort of insect or something. It could be a worm, it could be a insect, it could be a caterpillar or something. But he finds that he's that he's an insect. He can't even open the door. He answers the people who are calling to him, but all that they hear is some loud insect noise, and they can't understand him. And so we are like the man in the story who we are divine by nature, and yet one day we wake up and we see that I'm an insect. I'm living in this dream world, like a dream being. And so all of the answers that are given about why this world are like the insect in Kafka's story, going to a doctor and saying, "Oh, doctor, I woke up this morning and I'm a bug. I'm an insect. What can I do?" Well, the doctor, of course, sees that he's not an insect. He's just a human being, but he's suffering from some delusion. So the doctor can say, "Well, you're not an insect. You're the same as you always were." Then the character who thinks he's an insect thinks that, well, this doctor doesn't know anything. Obviously, I'm an insect, so I'll go to some other doctor. And he goes from doctor to doctor until he finds a doctor who says, "Well, yes, unfortunately, you have turned into an insect, but I can tell you how to come back to your human form. So you do this, that, and the other thing. Because you don't have hands now, you won't be able to hold the pills, so I'll put them under your wing, and you go home, and you take them in this way and so forth. So the doctor has to approach the man in a way that takes account of what the man is seeing, the man's own experience. And so the scriptures and great saints like Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother and others, they have to take account of the fact that we see ourselves as limited human beings who live in this world that was created, and we're suffering, and who made this world and why did they make it and all of that. So they give answers that are satisfying from our present standpoint. And so some people could say, and rightfully say, well, Swami, why are you destroying that? Just let their answers be. And that's true. That's one way. The problem is that a time comes for many of us when we say the old answers don't work anymore. They worked for a while. They motivated me for a while. But at some time we come to a point where we say it doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work. Why me? Why me? And why all of these problems? Why do I have to go through all of this misery and so forth? Why doesn't Sri Ramakrishna help me? Why doesn't Holy Mother take me out of this mess? And yes, they came for that purpose, to take us out of that. But eventually we find that the problem is one of ignorance. Even from the standpoint of the devotional idea of God, the personal God, the question is one of ignorance and forgetfulness. If you say that God made this beautiful universe, and it's our fault, our human nature's fault that we are in the mess that we are, it's karma's fault, it's the fault of sin, of Adam and Eve, or whatever it is that you say, then eventually we have to admit somehow this is a faulty world. It's a faulty world. It is. Why is there so much suffering? It's because something is wrong. Something is deeply wrong. Again, if you say that if you ascribe it all to God, again, that sounds good for a while, but then still, why? Why? So we come to the standpoint where we have to admit, no, I'm suffering from ignorance. If my mind were clear, if my mind were pure, if I had the true insight, I would see everything as God, but I don't. How could I forget that? Again, there's no how, and there's no why. We get into problems in theology and philosophy because we try to give a how and a why, which are impossible. There is no how and why. That's perhaps one reason why the Buddha dispensed with all such questions. He just said, you've been shot by an arrow. Don't ask who shot it and what velocity was it flying, from what direction did the arrow come. I'm struck with an arrow. I have an arrow within my abdomen. I have to get it out and get treatment. That's the question for us. How do I get out of this mess? How do I get out of this mess? So Vedanta states that more philosophically. Buddha dispensed with philosophy itself, but Swami Vivekananda said that no. People want to philosophize. They want to understand. They want to understand intellectually why things are the way they are. And so the Advaita Vedanta explains philosophically up to the point where it says that beyond this you can't understand. Why this happened we can't say. Why I woke up this morning and thought that I was an insect and saw that I'm an insect, there's no answer for that in terms of the insect. The doctor can just, eventually you have to come to the point that, well, I'm suffering from a delusion and I have to get out of it. I have to get out of this delusion. And so the question eventually comes that I have forgotten the truth. I've forgotten the truth. So the truth is here, but one problem is that we need practical answers. I've spoken from a philosophical standpoint, but let me just in the remaining few minutes I'll say something from a more practical standpoint and then come back to a devotional standpoint. The Vedanta says that the truth is here. That the truth is here. That I am the truth itself, but I've forgotten it. If I've forgotten it, and if I am the truth, then I recapture that truth just by paying attention. The truth is here right now in my own experience, but I'm not looking at it. I'm not seeing it. So let me learn to pay attention. Let me learn to pay attention. Let me learn to quiet the mind. Let me learn to just focus the mind and be present. That's the whole idea. This is the Vedantic explanation of the Buddhist practice of mindfulness. The Buddhist idea of mindfulness, they have a different explanation for it and why one should do it and what it leads to, but the Vedantic answer is, because there's Vedantic mindfulness also, the Vedantic idea is that the truth is right here, but I'm not seeing it. I'm even seeing it, but I don't recognize it. That's why Swami Vivekananda said, see the truth. Don't seek the truth, see it. We don't have to look for the truth. The truth is right here, right in the midst of, right inside of me, right now. But I don't see it. So let me learn to stop and pay attention. Let me learn to stop and pay attention. Let me look right here. Another thing that Vedanta says is that we're all asleep. We've fallen asleep and we're dreaming. So wake up. We have to wake up. So let me try to wake up. If I'm dreaming, then I can wake up. If it's just a dream, and those who realize the truth say that it is just a dream. It's nothing but a dream. It's as insubstantial as a dream. When you wake up from a nightmare, you don't think, well, where did all of those people go? Where did that tiger go that was chasing me? You realize, oh, thank God, I was just dreaming. I was just dreaming. What a terrible dream. Thank God I'm awake. And so all we have to do is to wake up. We have to wake up. And one way to wake up, as I said, is by paying attention. There are other things that I could say about that, but let me move on towards closer to a conclusion, because I'll have to conclude in just a moment. So everything still works. Prayer and devotion, worship, all of that still works. The devotional answers even work if I realize that these are provisional answers. From the non-dualistic standpoint, the standpoint of Advaita Vedanta, that when I see myself as an individual and when I see other individuals, I'm going to have three things that are necessarily present, that are necessarily real to me. One is, I find that I'm an individual among other individuals. I find that we're all present within a world, that is, within a loka, within an environment. There's the environment in which we are, that is our world. So there's me and other individuals. There's a world, and there's God. As long as I see myself as an individual, then there is a God. God is real, the personal God, God to whom I can pray. Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, Vishnu, Shiva, the Trinity of the Christians, Elohim, Yahweh of the Jews, Allah, etc. That is all as real as I am, not just this body, more real than the body is, as real as I am. God, Allah, Yahweh, God the Father, Shiva, Vishnu, Krishna, Rama, all of that is as real as I am as an individual. It's only when I go to the Absolute that all of that disappears, and then I see that the truth was always non-dual, oneness, perfect oneness, beyond even oneness. That's why it's called non-dual. That where God, soul, and universe all dissolve into one. God whom we worship, Sri Ramakrishna whom we worship, Holy Mother whom we worship, Shiva and other forms of the divine that we worship, are all that truth, but seen from our present condition. And so when we see this condition, then I find that I can understand Advaita, I can understand the ideas of non-dualism. Anyone can understand them. But when I get hungry, I go and fix food and feel that I'm hungry. When I need something, I call somebody on the phone and say, I need such and such. So right now, I'm living in a situation where I take all of this for granted. I can't help it. I can think Advaita for a while, and that's good to do so. It's good to understand it. It's good to meditate on it, to think about it. But I find that I keep coming back to this, where I see individuals and myself as an individual, where I can do some things, but a lot of things I can't do. So I have to ask help to do things. I have to take the help of society. In that situation, the Absolute is the whole. The Absolute appears as God. The Absolute also appears as the individuals. The Absolute appears as the world. But as long as I am dealing with myself as an individual and have to deal with myself as an individual, have individual problems and individual hunger and individual needs and so forth, then God is there. God is there. The world is there. And so praying to God is effective, because God is real to me. If God is real to me, it's because I haven't yet gotten to a point deep enough in life so that I see the reality of God. So it's not that God disappears. No, God is real, but eventually I find that the one that I'm worshiping, the one that I'm praying to, the one that I am trying to remember, the one whose name I'm repeating, is the same truth as I am. That there is a non-dual reality which is beyond all of this manifestation. But as long as I see myself as an individual, then I see the divine as well, as the supra-individual, that which is identified with the whole. And so prayer works, worship works. These provisional ideas, the idea of the universe being the play of God, yes, that also I can delight in. But it becomes a satisfying answer to me once I have understood the larger truth of non-dualism. And that's why the Holy Mother said once to one of her disciples, who was a sannyasi disciple of Swami Vivekananda, Swami Vimalanandaji, he wrote to Holy Mother and said that he was at the Mayavati Advaita Ashrama that Swamiji had established only for the practice of non-dualism, with no puja, no worship, no images, none of that, only for the practice of Advaita. But he said that I do puja here every day. But Swamiji came to Mayavati and he was very critical of my doing puja here. He said that he had established this, but I still do puja and I want your permission. So Holy Mother wrote back and said, no, what Swamiji said is right. That Sri Ramakrishna was Advaita. He was all Advaita. You were his disciples and you also are all Advaitins. Ami jor korite bolite pari. Jor kore bolite pari. I can say with great force and emphasis that you are avasham bhavi Advaitavadi. You are necessarily, you are Advaitavadis as followers of Sri Ramakrishna. So not that everybody who's interested in Ramakrishna has to be an Advaitavadi in the sense of studying the philosophy and all of that. But that's the background to Sri Ramakrishna. That's the background to the Holy Mother. And so Holy Mother recognized that and said that in unconditional terms. And so if I understand that, and I understand, as many Advaita texts say, that this whole universe arises within me, not me, Swami Atma Rupananda, but me as pure consciousness. This whole universe, where do I see it? I see it within myself, within my consciousness. Where do I see all of you? I see you within my own consciousness. The whole universe arises within my consciousness. The divine itself arises within my consciousness. So the whole arises within me. And so within that whole that I see, right now I see this individual bowing down to Sri Ramakrishna and the Holy Mother. And I see this whole universe as the play of Sri Ramakrishna, but I see that in the context of the whole. I see that in the context of the whole, non-dual whole. And that gives meaning to the worship, it gives meaning to prayer, it gives meaning to the idea of the play of God, the play of Ma Kali. It gives meaning to Sri Ramakrishna's question to the person who said, well, sir, it may be Mother Kali's play, but it's our misery. He said, but who are you? But who are you? Then I can understand that, and I can understand the idea of the play of God. So all of that becomes meaningful. And then, like going back to Kafka's insect, then like Kafka's insect, now I know that I'm not an insect. I am the reality itself. But as long as I see myself as an insect, I can play the part of an insect and enjoy it. Because I know that it's play. I know that it's play. And I know that I'm the one who's playing. That Ma Kali is not different from me. Not in an egotistical sense, not in a personal sense, that I'm Ma Kali and you're not. But in the sense that there's nothing but Ma Kali and there's nothing but the I, who I am, and who each of us is. And that the whole thing is a play. So I can enjoy being an insect until I wake up and remember that I never was an insect. It never happened. It never was the truth about me. The truth about me was the infinite, that I was, am, and always will be the infinite. That's the first, last, and only truth, even now. And if I can understand that, then I find that everything else finds its place of meaning. Short of that, there's always going to be the question, why me? Why me? Why did God make this mess of things? Why has God cursed me? Why has God given me suffering? Why did God ordain that my child dies? Other people have their children. Why did my child die? Why did my child die? Other people have their children. Why me? Why me? Other people are happily married. My husband beats me and throws me out of the house, and even the house where, if I could stay in it, it doesn't even shelter me from the weather. Why me? Why me? No, there's no answer short of non-dualism. There's no answer short of ignorance. And that ignorance is my own ignorance. It's not God's ignorance. It's not somebody else putting me in ignorance. I have forgotten. When I go to sleep at night and dream a nightmare, I don't wake up and say, why did God give me that dream? No, it was my own mind. It was a product of my own mind. I don't have to go outside of myself to explain it. And so the same with the non-dual truth. So I'll stop here. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to take questions today. I like to take questions, and I want to save time for questions. But sometimes to complete the subject takes the full time. And so I'll try to do better in the future. But I will stop here. And if anyone has questions, they can ask me outside afterwards. So let me make some announcements, and then the arati. So the Tuesday and Thursday we'll have the usual classes, and that will be so the rest of this month. The Tuesday class on the Gita at 7:30 at night, preceded by Arati for those who want to come to Arati at 7 o'clock, and then 7:30 p.m. the Gita class. Anyone can come at any, join it at any time. And the Thursday class, also anyone can come at any time. It's on Thursday at 11 o'clock. It's Thursday morning, 11 until 12. It was started at that time thinking of those who don't like to drive at night anymore. But everyone is welcome. Anyone who's not busy with work or whatever, anyone who wants to come, 11 until 12, and followed by Arati. Next week, I forgot to look at the, to see, Gita, do you know what I'm speaking on next week?
Yeah, just a moment.
I'll just mention while Gita's looking for the title, that the last Sunday of this month I won't be here to speak. That's the only time when there'll be an event which is where I won't be here. Otherwise I'll be here for all classes this month and all lectures except for the last, because the last I've been invited to Hollywood for a special event on Saturday, and Swami Sarvadevanaji wants me to speak on Sunday. So, have you found it?
Yeah, meditations on the self.
Okay, meditations on the self. Yes, okay, thank you. So just so you know, this Friday and Saturday I'll be away. I'll be coming back on Sunday early morning, so I'll be back here at the center before the lecture. So we'll have the lecture as usual. I get back early in the morning, so there shouldn't be any problem. I should be here long before the lecture, even if the plane is somewhat late. So now, for today, I was invited to the Sunday school to meet the kids, so I'm going to go to the Sunday school now. And Raka has kindly agreed to do the arati for me today. So Raka is going to do arati. So the arati is going to begin right now, and I'm going to get up right now and go to see the Sunday school kids. So, and then after, probably when both are finished, I'll be out there. So let me give a closing chant. Om madhumatarithayate madhuksharanti sindhavaha madhvirnasantoshadhihi madhunaktamutoshasi madhumatparthivagum rajaha madhudyorastu nah pita madhumando vanaspatir madhumagum astu suryaha madhvirgavo bhavandunaha. Om madhu, om madhu, om madhu. For us who seek the truth, may the winds blow sweetly, may the rivers flow sweetly, May the herbs yield us sweetness. Sweet be the night and the break of day. Sweet be the very dust of the earth. May the heavens pour down sweetness upon us. May the trees, lords of the forest, bear us sweetness. May the sun shed its sweetness upon us. May all the directions pour forth sweetness. Om, sweetness, sweetness, sweetness.